Hello, welcome back to my channel. So tonight I want to talk about a skill that I basically only learned in my 30s, and I know like a lot of people are probably already learned it like back as a basic thing, but I didn't really grow up with adult supervision, so I didn't particularly have a lot of skills that used to be modeled by other people or healthily modeled by adults. So this was a new skill. The skill was to sleep on it. When you people say things like that, like sleep on it, don't make like instant decision, don't make rush decision. You should sleep on it. And I did not have that skill up until maybe 30, in my 30s, 34, 35. I didn't really know what it means as in reality, because I feel like every time I get triggered, I tend to make like rash decisions, like reactive decision that it would not really solve the problem. It would just go around a circle and you will have to face the problem again in the future. So it's not necessarily a problem solution type of decision if I make it when I feel triggered. And I think I completely implemented it last year. I felt like last year when I got really triggered and I was so tempted to make a bunch of decisions based on emotion, based on reactivity, basically. And I remembered like a lot of the lessons that I learned in my like middle 30s, where my body was extremely catatonically burnt out, that I wasn't able even to get out of bed, even to pee or even to eat or even to do anything. But because I had my internet still, and I still have my phone, for example, and I was still able to receive things from the world like information, or if you receive trolling as well, because I was also like just started streaming back then. Yeah, I started streaming like 8 years, no, 9 years ago. Wow. Yeah, 9 years ago. Wow. Yeah. And doesn't feel like that long, but and then my body was still dysregulated because I wasn't eating. So it was just a lot of just pure panic attack and pure anxieties, basically. And I think when you are in that position where people have just basically left you and abandoned you, but they still want something out of you, it's as if that, even if you're dead and you are basically just a husk of a person, they still need that husk to be further break down so that they can extort something out of it, so that they can exploit it for their own benefit. It's just capitalism, it's nothing fancy. um I back then, like, I didn't do this spectacular gesture. What I did was basically just ignore ignore messages, like ignore um text, ignore emails, just ignore it. And up until that time, I never really do, and I still like now I have resumed not to do that anymore because I'm on on my phone a lot, and especially now I'm back reading manhwa on my phone, so it's impossible not to be replying in people instantaneously because I'm always on my phone. But back then, even though I have my phone next to me, uh, I just ignored it. I just started to not reply to things. I just felt like, oh, I really deserve to rest. I really deserve to, putting myself first. And especially at that time, it was quite different than now, because back then, oh, is this too close, guys? Is this too close? Back then, I really didn't have any desire to live or keep living. Right now, I think 9 years on, I'll be pleasant. I'll be okay if I die tomorrow, to be honest. But I'll also be okay if I still live on, as long as I will get to see the things that I wanted to see. So that's where I am now. But back then, it wasn't like that. It was more like I really don't want to live on. I mean, like I was like so ready to accept the consequences of not going to be alive for a long time during that period. So my headspace was just like, what's the point of always being triggered, always feeling anxious? It's just, I was just really angry. And so I was just like, wasn't replying for anything. I wasn't, you know, it wasn't an instantaneous thing. Like, there was no instant replies like I always had been. And now I'm doing it too. But so I just usually left it for like 2 3 days 5 days, which of course like healthy. I think people should do that, and I think a lot of people practice that particular, I'm not going to reply to you immediately. I will reply to you in due time. If you it's urgent or emergency, then you might need to have someone else to solve it for you. I'm not that person, and I still do apply it every now and then, but not as much now. I do only apply it now to certain people, and the people that I know are very toxic, and people that I still have control over the boundaries that I want to set out. Like there are other people that I don't have control or power over the boundaries that I want to set out for myself. So that's the area where I still feel disempowered, and feel reactive to. And I think that's the thing, right? Like you can only be reactive towards people that you don't feel like you have power in. And I think as soon as you figure out that is the area that you need to have power in, it's probably better if you fill that in as soon as possible. It's like if you're married and then you don't produce any income, and then your husband is basically in charge of your finances, and you don't have any say about it, so you are completely disempowered when it comes to finances. So maybe when you are aware of it, that you need to basically either make your own money or make sure that your bank account is being filled, even though your man is the one that makes it. Like have a chat or have a discussion, when once you are aware of it, I guess it's a good decision to start planning ahead. Of course, like this is advice from a stranger, and it's probably a hypocritical advice as well, because I'm not doing that. I have a plan to basically do things that are in areas that I'm disempowered in, but it's not going well. There's that too, right? Life is quite difficult. Just because you want to have it happen, just because you want to plan it out to be right, doesn't mean that it will come true. Or it doesn't mean that it will come true in your timeline. It might be longer than what you expect. But yeah, not feeling triggered, not feeling like taking the time to respond, not coming from a reactive place when you make decisions, having that space before you making decisions. It's something that I learned, and only like recently in the past 10 years or so. And I learned that it's really good. People learn very quickly. Some people don't, but some do. So, and there's nothing they can do about it. If you don't reply, what are you going to do about it? Text more and then have proof that they are basically harassing you, having, proof that they are escalating the issues with a lot of emotional baggage behind it. Because if you basically blocked all phone calls, basically you're just forcing people to write things down. And if people are using written communications, then you have traces that can be used as a record for the future if you are going into an argument or something. I had this lady one time last year that basically chased me around, or chased other people around as well. So this is like her MO of trying to get her to do her a favor. So she would call everyone in the little club that we have and ask for the favor. And I remember like, because I know like this is her habit and this is her nature, so I have basically try not to communicate with her over the phone. So just like written only, and in writing only, in email only, which she does use to communicate announcement and everything. So it's not like she is so foreign with the whole email thing. And she does use, like, communications app like WhatsApp, like those things, and Facebook. So it's not like she is not in touch with technology. She does. She just prefers to talk to people over the phone and talk to people one by one. And I think it's just one method that she does use as a way to convince other people. I think like everyone is caught on to it though. Everyone is just so caught on to it. But now they're just being polite, and they accept the phone calls, but they don't agree with the favors that they asking that she's asking of them. But when it comes to me, I would get, like, I remember like getting a message from this other lady basically telling me, "Hey, can you call this person because they said that they tried to call you, but your phone is disconnected." So I didn't have any intention to basically give them a disconnected number. I basically just wrote down my number, and my number was just wrongly recorded, where my handwriting is just appalling. Probably that was more of why it happened. It's not that I purposely didn't give them my phone number. Um, and I didn't call them. I just emailed them, and they basically tell me to call them because I really need you to call me. And I'm like, no, I'm not calling you. If you want me to, if you need something, just let me know via this email and reply back, right? Like they basically just wasted a reply, basically, by replying an email and say call them. I'm like, no, I wasn't ever going to call you, but now I definitely will not call you, especially with that kind of demanding tone. Um, and the next time I saw her, and she didn't reply, but next time I saw her, she was so passive. Not, she was quite just aggressive, not even passive aggressive about it. She was basically saying, because I asked, like, oh, I was being civil. I basically asked them, like, oh, what's, because I basically try not to react to people's false sense of urgency. I think that's the whole point of this talk, is just because people think that their problem is urgent doesn't mean it's urgent for me. And I think I needed to learn that, because as such a people pleaser, or recovering people pleaser, I would like to please them. Of course, if it's urgent, I would like to get it done for them as quickly as possible. But the lessons that I got is like, if these people don't even take care of me, why am I going to drop everything that I'm doing now just to please them? Like, no, it's not gonna happen. I guess that's the benefit of growing up. You kind of just learn these things, and these moments just come to you, and you make a decision that you never made in your 20s. And the next time I saw her, I basically asked, "Oh, what was it about that that you wanted to ask?" Uh, and she said, "Oh, it's already resolved. It's already resolved." And she was like, I think her voice was trembling a little bit. She was saying, "Oh, just remind me not to ask you if my house is burned down by fire." And I'm like, "Yeah, why would you call me if your house is burned down by fire? You should call the firefighter and your neighbor." I guess, like, I know, like, the idea, the tone is basically, you're definitely not the person that I would ask for help if I need anything. But I'm thinking that's definitely true, because you never helped me. And every time I treated you very well in the past, in the beginning of, in the interactions, for a few years I was being really nice. I gave her gifts, I think for about 2 Christmases, and she complained basically. And this was like the period when I was starving. I didn't have money to buy food, but I made sure that I always show up. I made sure that I did my bit and more. I gave gifts when no one gave gifts. So I'm like, you know what? Whatever you say to me is not gonna affect me at all. I know what kind of person you are, and I did not make that judgment quite harsh. No, in a rush. It took about 4 or 5 years to make that judgment after I basically had enough of observation time. So I didn't feel any guilt whatsoever. I think just because other people gave you an ultimatum about the situation and they felt it was urgent doesn't mean that you have to make it an emergency in your life. Um, and yeah, so I learned that the last past few years in my 30s. It's still a work in progress though. I still fall into reactive mode a lot, like in my people pleasing mode, like quite automatically. That I still have a lot of buttons that can be pushed and it can be pushed automatically. But I think forcing myself deliberately not to reply to something when it's really there asking for urgency, it's such a it's so hard because it takes so much energy for me not to do the default thing, which is reply straight away. And I think it needs to be it's a habit that all of us probably people especially like me who is so glued to their phone and answering automatically to because like there are other people who probably react very differently like people that react like me when I hear a phone call I would just avoid it with with all my being and they'll probably react the same way for a message or SMS or a email so for example um so I know like just because I my method of communication preferably is in writing doesn't mean everyone else is and I still get triggered and have anxious attacks sometimes when I get like a notification out of nowhere. My nervous system is still in recovery and I don't know if it's ever going to be healed, but I guess forcing yourself to take time and not abide to someone else's false sense of urgency is very important. It's a habit that we all have to kind of take care of by ourselves because especially as an older millennial, I'm 40 years old, I'm 41 years old this year. And we probably remember the times when there were no internet, when there were no, like even when we were kids, right? I know like by the time we got into high school, internet was there. But there were a lot of times, even in the early internet era, where we are not attached to the computer, we're not attached to the internet. There's a lot of gap in between, and I think the demand of instant response was not there per se. Like people give a lot of grace, a lot of time to for things for to turn around, and I think it's okay not to be instantaneously replying to people. I think and I notice now a lot of the younger people are also doing that now. Like I'm interacting with a few other young people in the community area, and they don't reply straight away. And I feel like that's good because it's training me to not to reply straight away because maybe a lot of times we need a little space to think, a little space to, just let a better and less emotional answer come to the surface rather than a reactive answer that comes from like fight or flight response from a traumatic space. I think that's what I learned, right? Like I learned to just calm down first and go into a neutral emotional space before responding to anything that I get triggered with. And that made a huge deal because and also I think like if you haven't responded to anything and I know like this probably sounds like a mind game, the power is in your hand, the power is in your court. And I think like usually in societal terms when you feel like oh the ball is in their court, so it feels better to say that because it feels like hey I did my part, it's now it's up to them, right? But I think there's a lot more power when the ball is in your court, when the ball is in our court, because we get to determine how the flow of this interaction is going to go. We get to determine the emotional flow, the emotional stance of it. Like we have the power to direct it to our own win in a lot of way, in our own to our own advantage. So yeah, so that's what I want to talk about today. I know it's always going to be long-winded. The point is not to have like a direct advice channel. I'm just talking, hanging out with you and talking what's what. Just talking about how to not be reactive and respond when you're feeling too emotional, I suppose. Anyway, hopefully that's useful somehow, somewhat, and a little bit of anecdote here and there. I'll see you guys later. My name is Valerine. I'm a solopreneur, digital creator on the internet. If you want to check out my other works, the links are in the description box below, and I will see you later. Bye, everyone.